Good morning. I'm going to talk about a hymn this morning, one that will be a favourite of many of us, I'm sure. Dear Lord and Father of Mankind. And how it links so many stories, biblical themes together, including particularly that of Elijah in 1 Kings 19. The music was by Hubert Parry, the great-great-uncle of a friend of mine, Tom Fenton, who sadly died very suddenly a few years ago, and whose memorial service was held in Gloucester Cathedral. And about 1,000 of us sang this hymn on that occasion. The words were by John Greenleaf Whittier, a wonderful name, and pulled together many biblical themes. Forgiveness of our foolish ways, the calling of those first disciples to Jesus by the Syrian Sea, and our rising to new life when we answer God's call. The loveliness of those years around Galilee as Jesus' ministry blossomed, and people were touched for the first time by God's love incarnate in man. In verse 4 we are reminded of the quiet hush of God's grace raining down, and it is likened to the manna that fell during the Exodus from Egypt's slavery. And that giving of God just after their escape from Egypt, the first Passover. Verse 5 reminds us of the beauty of peace, the peace that only God can bring us. And then in that final verse, we are reminded of Elijah's story. He had fled in fear of his own life. King Ahab and especially Jezebel were fed up with prophets prophesying bad things. I can't help thinking of the way that military forces here have endangered the lives of environmentalists over the years. And also today we are hearing a lot of prophecy of really hard times ahead, which is pretty obvious really given the financial situation we are all in. Anyway, going back to Elijah, he runs and hides in a cave where he experiences an earthquake, then a very strong wind, and then a fire. He must have been terrified. But then there was a calm, a still small voice of calm. We're all surrounded by prophets of doom at the moment. We shouldn't do what Jezebel did and just go killing them all off. We should listen and not dismiss them. But we should also listen for that still small voice that is calling us. Because we have much to give and much to learn. How do we get over the environmental issues, the excesses of littering and fly tipping that we've experienced during this time of pandemic? Quite what are the psychological reasons for people doing this, even more prolifically than usual, I don't know. So pollution, littering, the fight against single-use plastic, avoidance of all these issues which affect our environment, the way it looks and the way that wildlife is affected, and indeed our atmosphere is infected. So it's important to remember we live in a very thin bubble of atmosphere between Earth and space. It is very thin and very fragile. But we don't need to be afraid. We just need to concentrate on that still small voice of calm, especially at a time like this when there's a lot of chaos and uncertainty. Amen.